You don't know how much you miss it until it's gone. This is a place where you spend time with family and friends, take your emotions and imagination on a roller coaster ride, and also how some make a living. You don't know how much you miss it until it's gone. We all yearn for normality. When we are blessed to have a glimpse of normality, one should promise to properly embrace every part of it. You're either an entertainer or a consumer of entertainment. Yet, we all need an entertainment district.
I'm Seema Rao, Deputy Director and Chief Experience Officer of the Akron Art Museum, and I'm joined by...
My name is Theron Brown, and I'm a pianist from the Akron area. I also teach jazz piano at Kent State University. And yeah, I'm into just helping the community in the area.
That's wonderful. You're surrounded by keyboards there.
Yeah, we're in my basement.
Start? and also the Naughty Pine. I really love like the retro. When did you start playing?
Oh, when I was like 5 years old, and I'm 33 now. Yuck. But yeah, I started at my home. My mother had a piano at the house, and she would set me up to it, and I'd play. And
did she play?
Just a little bit, enough by ear. She could pick up little songs. But
were you an immediate? Like you just played and then it was just done?
Yeah, so it was like by ear, my church influence, with the culture there, a lot of it's learned orally. So as I grew, it just got stronger. But I always had an ear for music, picking up little, Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle.
So I'm not a musical person, but when you say by ear, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I guess I had the ability, and this isn't perfect pitch, but what's called relative pitch, where if I hear something, I can translate it on an instrument. And I realized that too. I could also play some other instruments a little bit easier, not proficiently, but I could pick up little things.
You know what I love is that when you say not proficiently and I say not proficiently, the sound is probably drastically different. The other thing I wanted to follow up before we kind of go forward is perfect pitch versus relative pitch.
Yeah.
What would that mean?
So perfect pitch is like the medical term is synesthesia. It's kind of coupled with that, where a person might see colors or use other senses that help solidify that sound of the instrument. So if I were to just play a random note, a person that would have perfect pitch could just name it. So it's still, to me, relative. It's just a different kind of relation. And
yeah.
Mine is more, relative pitch is more intervallic related. Yeah. So I have to have the home start, and then from there I can tell what the note is.
And intervallic, so valence is a word you use in chemistry for like layers, but valence is also a musical term.
I'm actually not familiar with that one.
Yeah, the valence of, and I have to tell you, I haven't been in chemistry a long time. But there is like the idea of the valence of electrons. They go, there's like a valence thing. And if this is this is to the world, so I'm not going to translate that because I don't know the actual thing. I just know that it exists. I feel so bad for my chemistry teacher right now.
No.
I worked so hard to teach her that. But what I like is that, so interval, that means that they're relative to each other, right?
Yes.
Whereas like
through distance.
Right. And the perfect pitch is relative to something that's like almost neutral, like a beyond.
Yeah, you're like assured, like if you were to hear your mother or father in the other room and mine are miles away right now, I would be sure that that's them because my pitch is very, I'm secure in knowing their voice and the tones and all that.
It feels like for somebody who's writing music, what you have is probably very useful because you can, you can create these tones in between each other. And you said, you used to pick up stuff, at church, and you were hearing some of these cadences. So how much of what you take in comes out in the music you create?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think that music is a life thing and a cultural thing. So there's a lot of what I like to call habits, maybe they're good or bad, but that I still have even from when I'm younger. And I think that relation is very important because it is, we got to remember, music and art is creative and a way for us to express ourselves. And I think when we're young, that is the most pure, unadulterated time when you're putting those things together, why you love who you are as a person and what you do. And for me, music and piano is a way for me to emote and share that with other people too.
So did you know from a really young age you were going to be a musician and writer?
Honestly, yeah, it was strange. I was always attracted to music. I also did, I love basketball. That was my other thing.
Well, there's like a rhythm, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't play that either.
Yeah. I think the discipline of those things too.
Yeah.
For me, when I was younger, I like the structure of it. And yeah, even now I still need that structure, and it keeps me in order.
I mean, my kids are Suzuki students.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a terrible Suzuki mom, but I try my best. Again, I hope, like, hopefully your mother's listening, but nobody who's ever educated me or my children is watching. But one thing I really appreciate about Suzuki and music, and my daughter actually does love to play basketball. She's a basketball player. And one of the things that I think about a lot of these things that we do that are not visual arts is that we train people. So you train them to think. And like you were just saying about the structure of it, you know, I think about how many, when I was in school, how many free throws you had to, because they want you to just keep your, you know, your hand this way. And for Suzuki piano, like how much of that is one, learning to play by ear, but then also training yourself to systems of learning.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that's sort of fascinating. I wish visual arts, a lot of visual arts education is not like that. It used to be like in the Renaissance, right? You just learned how, and if you look at old timey like letters people write, they'll often have like the same person's face, you know, like they all just look the same, because that's training.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
But then, so you use that training, but then how do you break out? Because you write your own music.
That's very true. So yeah, I think because there was this time that I spent where I didn't know anything. I was just raw and just playing what I heard, and I thought it was right, and luckily it was most of the time. But once you
must have been so cute at the piano.
We have some funny videos. So, yeah, there's some funny moments. But yeah, I would you know, try to refine the theory and things as I got older, and that kind of puts that more definition to things. It's like it almost kind of takes a little bit of your imagination away. So I take the concept of learn it and forget it. Once I have the theory of something, once I own it, you know, the concept, once I have the G minor chord, it's up to me as an artist or a creative to take that G minor chord and play it the way I would play it, even though, you know, a G minor chord, the way Bach plays it, is the same as Herbie Hancock, is the same as Stevie Wonder, you know, any genre of music. But it's how you play it, the rhythms, the cultural aspects, the meaning, where the chord's going, where it's coming from, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I'm going back to what you were saying about knowing your mom's voice.
Yeah,
because that's a thing, actually. Like if I hear your music now, having like, you know, you've luckily been a great partner of ours, so I've heard your music in, you know, like in something, you know, we were gonna have, we have partners on Jazz Fest. Sadly, thanks to COVID, it didn't happen. You were on the podcast, so you know, I've heard it. I can tell when it's you. And actually, even in this writing, I had, you know, we had looked at all of them. I was like, oh, that one's there.
Oh,
like,
that's the highest compliment.
There's an interesting thing about that, because you're using everybody's words in writing, just like your, you know, your chords. Words are the same in the English language.
Yes.
It's COVID. My dog likes to.
Hey.
She's actually photobombed about half of these. She's an attention hog. So how is that I can tell that it's you?
Yeah. So working on one's voice, that's, I think, the journey of every artist and every musician, is to have that personal sound and to allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to let others hear that. So I
Yeah, it
think,
must be hard because it's not like me writing. I mean, I write labels. I don't actually, it's not my soul. I
mhm.
love the label. I want it to work, but it's not my creativity, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That must be hard.
Yeah, I think it's for me, I try to, like when you walk into a room, you have a presence. Obviously, you have a presence. It's a very strong presence and leader like. That's what I'm just talking. You know,
This is the best interview I've ever
see,
had.
have me back, have me back.
Yeah, definitely every week.
Yeah.
So I do think you do too. I mean, when there's the picture that we use for the website, and I was like,
Mm,
what's funny is some of this, and we get headshots all the time because we have performers and artists, and so I see a lot of headshots. But yours is what some of them I'm like, that's not really, that's been staged. But yours is actually, I mean, it feels actually within keeping for your presence.
hmm. Yeah, that's it. I just try to be humanly like, uh, just present really, so that people
Yeah.
can feel who I really am, even if that's through a picture, my music. I don't want to put on a facade, I guess. Like if I'm a smiley person, so that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
you're very approachable. And I mean, I think we were talking about this when we were talking about Jazz Fest, and I think this is true about Jazz Fest. Jazz
mm,
for me is hard to understand. It
mhm.
is the abstraction
Me
of
too.
musicians. Well, that makes me feel better.
Yes.
I do. We actually, one of the things that we've been working on is being more honest when we don't personally have, like, our personal taste
Mm,
is staff. This is not
yes.
my favorite painting. We might say
Hmm.
in real life, just because I think for me, the thing about jazz, and I think about abstract art also, is that because the people who get it, um,
Hmm.
don't admit either that they had to work to get it or else that
Thank
they don't
you.
like it all.
Yes.
It makes it feel arcane. It makes it feel like I'm not allowed in that club.
Yes. And to speak on that, wow, that this is a subject I love to talk about.
Oh, good.
It's
Me too.
yes. I think because all these things that we're talking about is art driven, creative driven, and soul driven. I'm going to add that in there. Is that we have once these things get institutionalized, there's a box around it to an extent. So when these kind of things happen, there's a genre, and then we look at jazz as, yes, this higher art that only certain people can understand. We look at classical music as this higher art that only a certain group demographic. This is all music, and
Right.
you're supposed to have different opinions. I don't want everybody to like my music, and that is very honest and vulnerable
Yeah.
for somebody to say, you know.
Yeah, but it's also actually but it's also a little bit transgressive.
Mm, hmm.
Right? Like you just said,
I
I don't want
agree.
everyone to like it. It's not, and the better something is sometimes, the more it doesn't appeal to everybody. I mean, think about things that are
Yes.
super mass produced.
Hmm. Hmm. That's right.
They're not. But also, I bet many people might like some of your songs better than other of your songs, let's say.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that to me is also important, that you don't have to like everything to like that music.
Hmm. That's so interesting you say that. That my first album is entitled No Concepts, and it's very different. Every track is different. It's a mix of different instruments. Some songs are more like, yeah, you would put it in the category of jazz, but one's like this kind of electronic type thing that we just came up with. And where does that go? And we
Mm.
just wanted to go into the studio and record, and no concept. So now I've got this. I'm going to set up a series for this album that I keep putting out stuff that I just like to play. And anybody, if you want to check it out, go ahead. If you don't, that's cool too.
Nice. Nice. So it is the music you write for you or for me, the listener, I mean.
It's actually for the listener and the music. I always try to serve the music first, which the direction of that feeling. And then if it's my compositions, I try to get the message out. So then yes, it is for you. So
Yes,
I think
yes.
if the
Yeah,
music is
it's in
served
between
first,
me and you.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But it really has nothing to do with me other than, this is my voice. And that's something interesting too, is my purpose where I play from. You remember my background is church. My father's a
Yeah.
pastor, so
Uh-huh.
I've always played selflessly for something higher. So it's
What
it's
faith
really
is your,
easy.
what type of pastor is your father?
Oh yeah, apostolic and Pentecostal. Yeah. Mhm.
You're the second person in this series who has a father who's a, I'm not sure, I think he might be a minister. It's
Mhm.
Micah Craftsman.
Oh, okay.
So I've already forgotten what faith, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
Um, but apostolic, actually, one of my best friends from growing up was apostolic. There's a lot of music
hmm
being performed,
Lots of music, yes.
lots and lots of music.
Upbeat.
A lot of call and response, right?
Definitely, very good. Yeah, call and response. And these are things that go across in a lot of just Black American music. From jazz, blues, gospel. They're all the same.
Hmm.
Come from the
Hmm.
same source at least.
Hmm. Hmm. I
Mhm.
sort of think of them as this is probably really not canonical, but you know how at certain kinds of fast food restaurants, it's like the same 7 ingredients but in different mixes, like a taco, a burrito, da da da.
Yeah,
In some ways, I think a lot of American popular music is a lot of the same but different. So like
absolutely.
rockabilly is this, but rock is this, and country is this.
Yeah.
Blues is this, like
hmm
bluegrass. But they're all kind of because we come from the same experience,
hmm And then
right?
it's even geographical too. People want to separate it. Then there's West Coast jazz at one point.
Yes,
You got your
yes.
Delta blues
Mm.
compared to different other blueses. So
And do you listen to all this music? Is it all in there, and then they come out of you?
it is in there. Luckily, I've always been interested in world music, and I've had the chance to travel a lot too. So yes, those things get mixed in, and I think it just more so just lets me be more open
Hmm.
to other things, which is of course, yeah, culture. Of course, you should be open to that and
Hmm.
accepting.
Hmm.
So,
I think, of course, but not everyone does it. I mean, it probably
oh
comes
no,
from, like, of
I'm
course,
saying
but
that trying to
yes, no,
hint.
I know, and I think it's an interesting thing also about your approachability. To go back to, I have I'm wasn't raised Christian, but I've been to many faith, lots of friends, like on
hmm
sad, a lot of weddings, funerals, things like that.
hmm
And I think it's interesting how different congregations approach music so differently.
hmm
And one thing that I think about certain services, like an apostolic one, and I've been to happily, like services, and then sadly a funeral, is the approachability of the music and the words and the sounds.
hmm
So I don't know what's happening, and I don't know what's happening in any of them.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm not a Christian, so it doesn't, like, I don't necessarily have it's not like it's been trained into me.
hmm
But I appreciate the openness, and I feel like some of this openness that you're talking about for your career and your music and how you want me to experience it comes from the
hmm
idea that you grew up in a place where music was part of the opening to something big.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's something that I think subconsciously what you're talking about, and you just hearing you say it's like, oh yeah, that happened. And I don't recall, but it was just so in my culture at that time. Um,
So that's why you play. I mean, that must be sort of like playing live.
oh
When
yes.
we're here, I get to be in a collective consuming.
hmm
What do you hope that this collective people hearing you perform on your piano feels?
You're talking to other musicians with me,
Yeah.
or
Oh
oh
no,
yeah.
me, my visitor, the
Oh,
person in the audience, but
yes,
maybe, or
yeah.
also the other musicians too. But
hmm
since I'm not a
Um
musician, it's hard for me to find to imagine what it is.
Yeah, I mean, at the fundamental level, I just hope that a person would enjoy it and that they feel comfortable. Like, here's how I set things up. I'm not gonna come into the room and my play for my audience a whole bunch of heady things that they don't understand, even though I could.
Mm-hmm.
But what purpose does that serve other than my ego and pride? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the blues and introduce to you little words fundamental things that I know you understand, that I understand, and you're going to go on this journey with me through the show, and we're going to develop this language. And you're going to say, oh, I actually remember him playing that earlier, but now he's turned it into this. So I'm not trying to trick well, I am trying to trick you kind of, but I want it to be understandable. That I want to be clear. I want the piano to sing. I want the music to flow. So and then from there, you let your imagination take place. If you like it, you don't like it. If it's taking you to another world, or if it's making you reminisce or deja vu. All these things are what art is for. It's supposed to mark a place in history, so that later you can remember that night, or it brings back a memory from another time.
That's so it's so wonderful. And first, I'm going to underscore the beginning of what you said. It is so much. It requires humility and generosity to be a person who doesn't have to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I think this all the time when I hear like lecturers, scholars talk about stuff, and they use words that obfuscate. But what you just said about playing music that is accessible, it's a lot more about you if you play things that people don't get. Like that's huge. But so that I'm just underscoring that so everybody hears that again, because I think it's really important. But the other thing you just said that I think is interesting, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about, is you just talked about music as being interactive. You wanted me to have a moment with your music, but in real time.
Absolutely. And I always tell my audience members, if they hear something that they like, they can sure enough yell, clap, they can stand up, dance. Now, if they hear something they don't like, then we kindly ask them to pay for their food.
I still have to eat. My kids still have to eat.
Leave a wonderful tip for your waiter, waitress.
Well, so the person who does a lot of our music curation at AAM, Caitlin Evans, I was saying to her once, I have to admit, I just don't like jazz. This was a while ago. And we joke about it, actually, because sometimes we're like, how I don't like jazz. But I've been thinking a lot about that statement. And I'm saying it because we're trying to be honest about taste on some level.
Yes.
Because, she's not curating for the music series is for her taste. She's curating to have a group of audience members, for example. But the thing I've learned is also in this experience of hearing her pick and maybe change and who's going to be in her music series, I've come to say that I wouldn't say I actually don't like jazz. I don't like all of it, and I don't like everyone that anybody plays ever.
Yes.
And I think that statement is really a defense mechanism. I mean, and what you're saying is, so definitely don't heckle you if you don't like the one song, because you might like the next song.
Yes.
Right? Like you might you might have liked the previous song. And but you also are like talking about being so interactive. It's because of your roots, right? Like that's sort of getting up and in spirituals would be something you would do.
That's right.
People probably got up in your father's sermons and cheered, clapped.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that just that shows us coming together. Even in the band, when I'm in a trio situation or something, if I'm playing something, then I enter and the drummer might interact, and that just took the music in a whole different direction into another level. But I have to be open for that. So the same goes for the audience. I think that if I come in prepared to first feel the room, see who all's there. Most of the time there's people that want to see me, friends and stuff, so they help. They already know what's up.
Taper the hall.
They make the vibe. So then it's easy for me, and they know what's going to happen, and they know the kind of spirit I want to bring, and then by the time we get to the end of the show, people, it's more than just a critic in the New York Times writing about the music, but what did you feel? We got people in here talking to each other because I had them interact through the music. I had them do call and response with me over blues, and they actually were a jazz musician at that time and didn't even know it. So when I think about the person that says My wife is hilarious too. This is what I'm going to use this as an example. There's some people I think that she's come across that they say they can't stand jazz when they hear that her husband is a jazz musician. And she's like, really? Well, do you like Christmas music? Oh, I love Christmas music. 90% of Christmas music was written during the 20s through the 50s when
Yeah.
jazz was the popular music.
Yeah.
And it remained today, So
No, it's true.
again,
It is, a lot of it are jazz musicians.
oh yes,
Yeah, yeah,
the
right?
swing
Right.
beat,
That's
the
right.
shuffles, all that stuff, the blues sounds, all of it. So I think again, it's this genre separation.
Mhm.
You want to call it genre racism?
Yeah. No,
You
well, I
know?
do think a part of it, we were talking sort of internally about what music institutions play. When you walk into, I always think, oh, I'm clearly the right age for this grocery store. So my grocery store has music playing, and it's always like the music that happened when I was in high school, but like done in like a Muzak version. And I'm like,
Ah,
oh, they just
yeah.
know I'm a mom age. I was like, oh, they profiled me. But I do think, I mean, there's two reasons I have a hard time with jazz. For me, the jazz that I often hear on like NPR when my kids were little and I was up real early, it'd be the jazz hour, is stuff that doesn't have a regular beat.
Ah,
The
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that like goes like, it seems like the ball is just like, like dum, 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 dum. And
Yes,
that
yeah.
for me is hard because I'm not a musician and I'm just used to music with a regular beat. So that's one thing. But I do think you're right that there actually is also this sort of idea that you have a lifetime of experience that prepares you to listen to music that has a
Yeah.
response. And if you don't, I think there are like, frankly, racial overtones to people who don't like jazz.
Hmm.
For me, it's actually the jazz I don't like is the jazz that's experimental. Like I like jazz, like
Hmm.
if it feels like the beat is going in a sort
Yeah,
of an
yeah.
order, I'm like, oh, I
Hmm.
could go there.
Hmm.
I've come to learn. This is
Yeah,
for self
yeah.
introspection, thanks to our music series, including you actually. When you're going to be in our music series too, so I've
Hmm.
sort of come to see this. But I think probably some of the people have a racial reason that they don't choose to like jazz or understand jazz. Am I
Oh,
reading
yeah.
it wrong?
No, you're spot on, and I could take a whole hour. As I said, I'm a music educator,
Yeah.
a jazz music educator. So that's definitely one of my things is knowing where this music comes from and what it's gone through and why I even play it. And the
Mm.
biggest part of why I play it is because, first of all, it's a part of my culture, and a lot of those musicians come out of the church. There's so many relations there, but also is the genius of these musicians and that I studied was not their history was not presented truly in school. And being on that side as a student and being on this side as an educator, now I'm making sure that I present these things in my classes and these issues through the music and through the history and show how it's not hasn't changed at all today.
It,
You
no.
know,
Yeah, it's sort of nauseating sometimes to me to read stories about people in the 20th century. I mean, our African American people largely where African American centers are, so that's
mhm.
big cities in the South, whatever, who were incredible musicians and just didn't get their due because of their
Mhm.
race.
That's
And then the
right.
music that's played becomes very popular,
Yes.
uh, but they didn't individually get their due.
You're
Part,
absolutely right. From record companies owning the music to club owners, cabaret cards, which only allowed them to get paid or to play in clubs. If those got taken away, then who knows when they were going to eat. So yeah, all this stuff is in some history books. And with the heightened times now, these things are really they they're aware and people are being sensitive to them. And
mm.
I'm happy that I'm able to. Kent State is a place where I've been able to be vocal.
I'm an alum. I'm
There you
proud
go.
of the
Beautiful.
of the MLIS group. Yes. No, I
Hmm.
think that's great because there's so much that people listen to. your writing talks about entertainment. I think all the time about like, my kids, there was some family visiting from India. We were at the Rock Hall to give them a free plug, I guess. But, one of the things is somebody who I was born in the States. My parents came in the late 60s, early 70s. And I've traveled back and forth, and we have family who, travel back and forth. And it's interesting, I walked them in and they were like, we were reading it and they were like, wait, they didn't? They weren't allowed, like, wait a second, they were trying to understand like segregation. Now, none of my family lived in Indian segregation. There was segregation there too. But it was just a little bit earlier. So that's why I don't have any living relatives who experience that. But I always say to my children, yeah, like, I wonder who's making the money on that song. Like whatever music they're listening to. And they're like, and I think that every time you say these things, you do it justice to some musician, maybe who's your student right now, that the music industry could change, because it's a behemoth that's taking money from a lot of people, many of them women and people of color.
Yes. And wow, you just said a mouthful there. Another thing. That's another hour right there. That last part.
We're going so far away from your writing. I didn't have anything about it.
Yeah, did we get the women of color? Yeah, let's go there.
Let's talk more.
Oh,
but as an educator, like, how are you helping your students make sure that they advocate for themselves?
Yes, I try to stay as current as possible with my students and be as realistic as possible. One of the things that is big in education right now is that people are talking about what is taught, and all we're getting is European centric studies. And throughout my whole studies, there weren't any African American, too many composers that we studied. I could count on one hand.
I bet.
And that's probably why I was attracted more to jazz and stuff too. But as an educator, I'm trying to also show students that the university isn't quite as forward moving as it should be. And like you said, things are changing with the internet, and definitely changed now. But even before all this happened, there's been shifting. And, musicality is not quite that. You have to be able to interact and play, be able to do things currently, or you're going to be finding a different kind of job and not pursuing what you love.
No, because I mean, you were describing sitting on stage with your other musicians and then having to go with them. That sounds incredibly hard to me. Like, you have something and then you're in the moment going with them. That requires a huge amount of training, experience, know-how, talent, all of those things. But
trust.
Trust, but then the market also has to support that. And so, then we have like a whole nother part of it, right?
That's right.
So it sounds hard, but important.
Yes, and the market is saturated. I'm sure you see a lot of the do-it-yourself. People are creating platforms to show their music, Patreons and YouTube channels. So you're not going to the industry person anymore to package it up and distribute, because I sit on my computer and do that. And it's also in my hands to control, which is actually a powerful thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
democracy.
Right. I was in a movie about it. The Miles movie actually talks about that. The whole movie, he's trying to get his records back from Capitol Records. And guess what? The same thing's happening today with Kanye West and Sony and Universal. Things are getting
so
exposed.
Much of that system is I mean, like, you think of like A&R guys, like, we don't even need them, much of the system was that with Sony and some of those things were like pyramid schemes on some level. I mean, I think anytime I go to a really big city or and I'm in a public transportation thing and I see people performing, like every time I'm in New York City on the subway and I see people performing, and we always give them coins, and I think what's sad is that's actually harder to do than what I do every day in my job. I mean, that's really hard. It's really hard to go out there and to go back kind of at the beginning of this talk, to be the person like you as a little kid on your piano, trying to get like the positive feedback loop. I'm sure you were a kid, you played pretty well, people liked it, you kept doing it, kept doing it. And to put yourself out there is way harder than me, you know, signing checks. Like, it's just a different kind of heart. It's what we value as a society. And so the system could be different.
Yes. Right? Yeah, it's all perspective and perception, I think, and everything's kind of has been wonky. I think the things that are beautiful, of course, we have them, and they're at our hand, they're at our disposal, so maybe we take them for granted. Like our arts, you know, I always say that everybody, you spell heart H-E-A-R-T. Everybody has a heart, and guess what? Art is in it. You can't have a heart without art. It's a part of the word. So
yeah, it's a part of wellness. It is a part of wellness. One thing that, you know, this has sort of been a heavy conversation, but it's also sort of had, we were talking about church and lightness and your musicians and people standing up. And in some ways, your writing that you did for the work that Reggie commissioned has that. Like, I kept looking at the line about entertainment, and I was thinking about how it's sort of, you know, it's dense and it's heavy, but then at the heart of it, to use your word, it's about entertainment. So when you were doing this writing, also it had a wonderful cadence. I was like, oh, this is clearly a musician who wrote this. But what were you sort of, what was in your mind as you were working on this writing?
Yeah, so this was actually towards the beginning of the pandemic, I believe. And
you mean a decade ago?
Yeah, really. I was just thinking, like, my gosh, I'm trying to remember how I felt, but rereading this, obviously, I think I was really missing and trying to figure out not playing out. You know, we just talked about how, you know, obviously my whole life, that's what it has been, is playing for people. And now that is not possible to an extent.
Right. I will say you're lit up when you talked about performing with a group of humans who are in the same room. You didn't have that same, like, sparkle in your eye when you talked about performing on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. So it works, but, you know, that's the reason why I picked piano to perform. You know, I practice to perform. I've performed so much. There's so many good memories, and I also had looked forward to performing even after. But so I think that's what this had gone about me trying to translate, was that, wow, you just, you know, and at the time I was gigging like crazy right before all this happened, almost like, you know, I was even having gigs on Mondays and stuff, and that's irregular, you know. Of course the weekends, but a Monday gig, you know. And there was
actually,
a point.
Monday would be a great time once the world opens. I think Monday would be really fun. Like,
make that the new gig day.
Yeah, like, I think that's kind of fun. Like, start the week right. Go out for like a happy hour. That would, I mean, come on. Once the world opens, people are going out anytime you like.
You see, we should take advantage of the set new normals. Yes,
we should set total new normals. Yeah, and I think probably there was probably an absence. I also really loved the idea of you using the word entertainment. You know, that entertainment can be a negative, you know, it can be sort of pejorative, but I loved the way that you used it, because it was a positive. You are part of your job is to entertain people with your art.
Yes, and that took me some soul searching, because, you know, I am an artist as well, but also I had to come to the conclusion that I don't like being, you know, that can, again, that's to me like a genre, or, you know, your perception. I want to be more personal than that. And my personality, when I'm in, you know, talking to people, I like to make jokes and make them laugh. I like people to feel comfortable around me, and you know, even if it does get serious, then you can open up to me or not. So that's what the music is. If we want to have an intimate conversation, then I want to try to present that. Or if I want you to laugh, there's going to be some of that in there too. So yeah, to me, it is a part of it is entertainment, along with my artistry.
Yeah, but the way you describe it is that you're entertaining me, but not in the sort of you know, like cookie cutter way. You're entertaining in a way that makes my mind think.
There you
That
go.
is an art. So entertainment is not mutually exclusive of art or
Love it.
thought. It's actually
Love it.
it's like the door, the entryway to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that probably is the highest praise, the highest form of art, right? An art that actually engages the visitor, the viewer, the
I think
listener.
so. Yeah, I would think so.
So that's probably a great place for me to hear what's exciting for you next. Since
Oh,
I want
yes.
to hear more.
Yeah. So as you know, I put out my first album, and I actually have it here.
Oh,
I'll
you
show
do?
you.
Let's see.
Oh.
Ooh, who did the
No
cover design? It
cross-steps.
looks great.
Yeah, a guy named Kush he's an artist, Kush out of Cleveland.
Cool.
And
Looks
yeah,
good.
he took my picture and just kind of animated my face there. Kind of
It
looks
looks
like me.
great. It does. It does. It does. It does. The glasses are key.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because my 2-year-old son does recognize it. He'll look at it and say, Dada?
Oh. See, that artist did it right.
Yes, yes. But I am working on another project I've been writing, and this actually goes along with everything I stand for and what I want to present to the world. But it's called Spirit Fruit, and it's based off of the fruit of the Spirit found in Galatians in the Bible, which is love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, and yeah, it keeps going.
All
And,
the things we need right now.
exactly. And at the end of the verse, it says, against such there is no law.
Oh,
Isn't that
that's
wonderful? It's like,
beautiful.
here's your path to freedom to have all these wonderful things, and nobody can take that away from you.
That
Uh,
that's beautiful.
yeah, so we're going to try to put that into music and get it out to the world here in the next, 2021, I guess.
That's wonderful, and it's also probably going to be a wonderful thing as we get into the winter, fall. It's already fall.
Mhm.
Fall's really hit hard, and winter for you to be working on it
Yes.
during the
Yeah.
season, because you'll have to be working on it in that room potentially.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, I've got things going already. So.
And so, how do you start a new album, or have you been like? Is it always like on little scraps of paper, or?
Actually on my computer right now, and voice. I'll sit at the piano and just record sometimes. But right now, this is an interesting project. I've been working on this for the past 7 years. The concept of it, yeah. So it's just
Actually, also a lifetime. Probably started with your
it
father, right?
has, yes. And I actually have videos of him talking about it and messages. So, I think it's grown with me, and I had to figure out some things through life in order to say, okay, I'm ready to present this now. I think my kids had a lot to do with it too. Seeing them and how they're just so pure. There's nothing better, and we got to get back to that.
No, I often think like when my kids say something, and I think, oh, I wish I could be so not jaded, like just
Yes.
again,
Yes.
But what a great thing to come out of this time with something even better. It
Yes.
really kind of summarizes your whole ethos in life. But like
Mhm.
you could see this half full or half empty, and I'm going to choose full.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. Well, that's a
Yes.
great place for us to end this conversation. Thank you very much for being here.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me.